Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. A member of Grassy Narrows First Nation is still looking for answers from the government of Ontario over mercury poisoning in her community. The First Nation in Northern Ontario has been dealing with the effects of mercury in the English Wabigoon River system for decades, which came from a nearby paper mill. Grassy Isaacs took her concerns directly to Premier Doug Ford this week as he attended an event in the Niagara region. In a video shared on social media, well-known community member and advocate Grassy Isaacs can be seen shouting questions at Premier Ford as she is led out of the event by security. Ford continued his speech as Isaacs was escorted out. Isaacs says she has waited years to confront the Premier and her emotions were running high.
Our community's been fighting this for so long. Like, yes, the other day after that happened, I was just thinking about, how my grandfather, he was poisoned by mercury, my mother, me, my children, and my grandchildren, so that's like 5 generations of us being poisoned. And like, how could he ignore, that question? How could he just keep brushing off Grassy Narrows that way?
Isaacs and other members of Grassy Narrows First Nation are demanding fair compensation for the community, as well as support for the restoration of lands and waters impacted by mercury. The Montreal Police Department are looking for witnesses and potential victims after 54-year-old Mark Pomerantz was arrested in early August and charged for sexual assault. The investigative team has reason to believe that there may be more victims within the Indigenous community. If you or someone you know has been a victim or witness to acts allegedly committed by Mark Pomerantz, the Montreal Police would like to speak with you. Mark Pomerantz is 54 years old and speaks English. He's 5'7" and weighs 180 pounds and has brown hair, hazel eyes, and drives a black truck. Investigators have reason to believe he may have had other victims from Indigenous communities who traveled to Montreal. If you have any information, you can call the sexual assault hotline at 514-799-7225. Or if you don't feel comfortable talking to the police, you can contact an organization that serves the community in Montreal. Chief Inspector David Shane of Montreal Police shares the alleged events following up to Pomerantz's arrest.
Well, August 8th in Dorval, near the Dorval Circle, the suspect allegedly approached the victim, offered her a lift, and then brought her to an isolated area where he allegedly sexually abused her, then left her there and left.
Quebec's most northern region is on track to have the highest rates of tuberculosis in the world. This, according to the Nunavik Regional Board of Health and Social Services, or NRBHSS, which says there are 84 active cases of TB to date this year in Nunavik, compared to 94 cases last year. The growing rates of TB in the region can be noticed in the amount of communities which have active rates of infections. Only 2 of Nunavik's communities were experiencing active outbreaks in 2019, but now 7 of Nunavik's 14 communities have individuals infected with TB. Jessica Ouard leads the tuberculosis elimination program at the NRBHSS. She says the issue is not only the high rates of TB, but the difficulties associated with treating it.
Often when people are sick enough or very sick, we need to send them to Montreal, not just to communities up north. So they have to be in Montreal. They're really, they can be really isolated from the community, from the land. And this is something we don't often talk about. And it's still a reality in terms of the historical context that we got, that we're experiencing. Some people had their aunt, their uncle going down south in the sanitarium 50 years ago and never came back. So we still see the mistrust related to that, and this is something as health professional we need to compose with. But for patient, it's still related to trauma and history.
The Alberta Fish and Wildlife Enforcement Services, or FWES, has charged 5 people with 34 offences under Alberta's Wildlife Act and 9 charges under Canada's Criminal Code for the poaching and killing of eagles in First Nations near Calgary. APTN's Grassy reports.
The 5 people charged includes American Simon Paul of Montana, Teresa and Eli Snow of Morley, Alberta, and James Britton and Sophia Soriano of Calgary. Simon Paul was previously wanted in the U.S. for multiple charges related to killing birds of prey in Montana and failed to appear in court. Then in August of last year, the FWES's undercover unit received a report that Paul fled to Canada and was residing with Teresa Snow in Stony Nakoda, located just west of Calgary. Last November, more reports came in of Paul actively killing eagles in Stony Nakoda and Eden Valley First Nations. Paul, Snow, and Britton then allegedly sold items like a bald eagle feather headdress, black bear claw necklaces, and a raptor talon dance stick. Paul and Eli Snow was also caught allegedly shooting eagles and hawks from their truck near Cochrane just last March. After search warrants were obtained, the FWES found freshly removed eagle feet with talons, feathers, blood, and other raptor parts, as well as unsecured firearms. Both the RCMP and the Tsuut'ina Nation Police Service were also instrumental in the investigation. In a statement, Mike Ellis, Alberta's Minister of Public Safety, said, "Poaching is a crime that robs our province of wildlife that is central to the lives and livelihoods of many Albertans. I commend the dedication and hard work of Alberta Fish and Wildlife officers, along with our law enforcement partners, into these investigations to put an end to these illegal activities and help conserve and protect Alberta's wildlife." Paul, who is from St. Ignatius in Montana, along with another poacher, Travis Branson, have both been previously charged in the U.S. for illegally killing 3,600 birds and selling illegal bird parts and feathers on the black market between 2015 and 2021. If convicted, Paul could face up to 11 years in a U.S. prison. Grassy Narrows, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
To Saskatchewan now, where Premier Scott Moe is in Saskatoon to announce additional funding to support the city's unhoused population. Both the province and city say they are working together to ensure no one goes without the supports they need. Saskatoon will receive an additional $3 million annually to keep urban shelters open year-round. In 2023, the province announced a $40 million plan to address homelessness that includes enhancing outreach responses, new permanent shelter spaces, and complex needs shelters. As a part of that plan, the city opened 2 new drop-in centers. Earlier this year, one at White Buffalo Youth Lodge and the other at Station 20 West. Today's funding will ensure these shelters remain open through both the summer heat and winter cold. Premier Moe says homelessness often intersects with mental health and addictions, and that supports must continue so people can get the help they need.
I certainly want to be a part of a government that is investing in those recovery opportunities for people, because those folks, they're someone's brother and someone's sister. They're a son or a daughter, and quite likely even a mom or a dad. And they deserve the opportunity to be able to access a recovery opportunity and a pathway to a home.
Time to step aside for a quick break. And then our Truth and Politics panel will be here to discuss the forensic audit of the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations. Stick around. Welcome back. Details are slowly leaking out about the forensic audit of the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations in Saskatchewan. The political advocacy organization that represents more than 70 First Nations in that province has refused to comment so far. Indigenous Services Canada says it presented the findings of the audit to the FSIN on September 11th, and a summary will be available for the public before September 30th. For more on this, we're joined by our Truth and Politics panel. Jennifer Leywitz is the CEO of Pusquaw Strategies, and Niigaan Sinclair is a columnist with the Winnipeg Free Press. Jennifer, Niigaan, been some time. Great to see you both. Jennifer, we'll start with you. A report saying as much as $34 million in spending has been categorized by the audit of FSIN as being ineligible, questionable, or unsupported. What can you tell us about this?
There's been, screenshots and some information floating around on social media over the last week, especially since the audit was apparently completed. We don't have the final report yet. I don't know anybody that's been able to even read it that can pass on some information on what's going on. But what I do know is that it seems like we're not getting a lot of communication. Chief Kelly Wolf from Muskeg Lake had put out there was a news article the other day saying the FSIN just hasn't been talking to anybody. And I think that's one of the biggest problems we're seeing right now is what is going on? Why is this organization that represents over 70 First Nations and tons and tons and tons of First Nations people in Saskatchewan saying nothing? So there's not a lot of information to give right now because the FSIN is not communicating or giving any of that information to the public.
Niigaan, Indigenous Services Canada has told APTN that the department provided an estimated $141 million to the FSIN for the period that's under review. So this is almost 1/4 of that spending needing accounting for. Is that a pretty big deal?
Well, let's break it down a bit. The expenses that were indicated as concerning, there was about $30 million of spending that was deemed as quote unquote unquestionable. And then there was about $150,000 that's unsupported, and then $3.7 million that's completely ineligible. In any place, anywhere, if there were millions of dollars that were deemed ineligible for use, let's just take that very small fraction amount right there. We're talking almost $4 million of ineligible spending that for things like looks like auto use, uses for maybe perhaps supporting dinners or meetings of some kind. My point of it is it just leads to a whole lot of questions and a whole lot of questions that may not be answered. One of the real problems for anyone who works in this, such as we do, is that it's very difficult to trace the money lines. Much work within First Nations governance is lacking human resources, and then on top of that, people who perhaps are coming from communities or situations in which there hasn't been a lot of administrative either support or engagement or thought put into the administration of these meetings. And then on top of that, then there's the issue of corruption, which seems to be at least somewhere in some of this. And so there's a lot of questions that come out of this that I think that the federal government, who is supposed to be overseeing this, needs to answer.
Jennifer, the largest item here is more than $20 million in COVID funding. Some chiefs have been calling for transparency from the leadership who have been silent, as we said. When the details are finally made public, what do you expect the fallout to be?
It's hard to say what the fallout will be because when it comes to situations like this, it goes beyond just what's right and wrong. And there's, very close family ties, there's very close community ties in us as a people. And so naturally, there's going to be those kind of balancing of how do we approach something like this. There will be chiefs that inevitably will support the FSIN no matter what. There are chiefs that, are going down the road of this is not right. Our communities were suffering, especially during COVID, which was a time of a crisis. And those dollars were supposed to be used for protecting our people. And to hear that some of that money may have been misused. And we've been hearing COVID funds over and over and over again. And I think it's because it was such a large pool of funding handed out so quickly to get us the help that we needed during a time of, again, crisis, that I feel like the federal government is kind of what kind of safeguards did we put in place? What kind of safeguards did they have in place? And now, who's responsible for that? And how is the government even going to claw that back if it isn't spent properly? So I think that's going to be the question over the next coming weeks when we start to hear more about this audit and the report is released.
Niigaan, we asked Indigenous Services Canada if they would be forwarding the audit to the RCMP. The department ignored that question, but what do you see as possible outcomes here?
Oh, they for sure would ignore that because they're culpable in the lack of oversight. There is some kind of passing the buck here, as Jen, I think, alluded to in her last answer, in that there is a real lack of oversight here when it comes to First Nations. But I also have a great deal of empathy because a lot of First Nations, and particularly Indigenous organizations and lobby groups that lead, like the FSIN, it is in a situation in which they'll claim sovereignty. They claim that they don't have any duty to provide distinct accountability on certain funding and programs in which they're administering because it's an issue of control. Here's the problem. My empathy goes so far as to our chiefs acting honorably, responsibly, and ethically, even though they are chronically under-resourced, put into very difficult situations, a lack of human resource in our communities in particular, and high demands, emergency situations. So I have a lot of empathy for that, but you aren't helping the argument when you are leaving it up to organizations, accounting firms, governance to be able to hold you to account. We should have people and leaders that are willing to step up and provide the accountability and the distinctive paper trail, as it were, to where that money was spent. And that just seems to not be here. It seems to be very absent.
We'll leave it there. We're going to talk about some exclusive reporting by APTN News on what was happening behind the scenes at Indigenous Services when changes were made to Jordan's principal. Thanks to you both. The Supreme Court of Canada went north of 60 recently. Our Bruce Dela Cruz was there. We'll have more after the break. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. And Dorothy Ratch shared a picture from a daily visit from one of her neighbors. Almost looks like a lawn decoration. Thanks for sharing, Dorothy. You can keep those photos coming by sending them to share@aptn.ca. And remember to include as many details as possible to help us pick our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, sunny and 19 for Fredericton, 17 in Halifax. 3 with a chance of snow in Kuujjuaq, 6 in Nain. Sunny and 17 in Montreal, sun's out and 12 for Val-d'Or. 19 under sunny skies in Sault Ste. Marie, 17 in Ottawa. Cloudy and 11 in Thunder Bay, 15 and sunny skies in Sioux Lookout. 17 with the sun out in Churchill, cloudy and 16 for God's Lake. Showers and 15 in Winnipeg, cloudy and 15 in Dauphin. 18 and cloudy skies for Regina, 19 in Saskatoon. 18 in Meadow Lake, 23 with the sun out in Stony Rapids. In northern Alberta, sunny and 21 in High Level, sun's out and 22 in Fort McMurray. 23 under sunny skies in Edmonton, 28 and sunny in Medicine Hat. 21 and sunny in Vancouver, 24 in Kamloops. 19 in Prince George, 9 in Dease Lake. Sunny and 10 in Old Crow, 6 in Whitehorse. 15 in Yellowknife, sunny and 16 in Norman Wells. +1 with a chance of snow in Sax Harbor, 7 in Paulatuck. 7 in Chesterfield and Whale Cove, 10 in Arviat. -1 in Resolute, +5 in Joe Haven. City of Yellowknife was treated to a visit by the Supreme Court of Canada as part of their 150th anniversary tour this year. Video journalist Bruce De La Cruz was there to learn why every Canadian should know how the Supreme Court works, including Indigenous peoples.
While sentencing is based on the principles of law,
for 2 days, Supreme Court members met with the press, the Northwest Territories legal community, the public, and Indigenous elders to answer questions and bring awareness of the role the Supreme Court plays. One topic of interest was the absence of GLADU reports in the Northwest Territories, which are used elsewhere in Canada to inform the courts the impacts of colonialism on Indigenous offenders. Northwest Territories Supreme Court Chief Justice Shannon Smallwood hopes to see GLADU reports in the future.
I think that's something that the Supreme Court, I can only speak on behalf of my court, is very interested in pursuing. I know that's something that the Department of Justice has looked into. It hasn't materialized, but I'm hopeful that that will come to be, because it would be very helpful to the court in sentencing.
Later in the conference, Michelle O'Bonsawin, the first Indigenous person to serve on the Supreme Court of Canada, says reaching out to all levels of community makes each judge more informed and well-equipped on a social level.
It's also part of our own cultural competency to understand, because I'm an Indigenous person, but I'm not an Indigenous person who lives here. So some may think an Indigenous person from Ontario is going to understand the lived realities of someone from the Northwest Territories, but that is not so. So it adds to my own personal knowledge to understand about knowledge, traditions, and orders from the different communities that I take back and I willingly share with my peers.
O'Bonsawin wants the relationship between the justice system and Indigenous people to improve before the Supreme Court's next big anniversary.
That there will be hopefully a social change, a change in the justice system where there'll be a better understanding of the impact of different things like residential school, intergenerational trauma on our people, so that in the future, hopefully these numbers are going to lessen, because I think it's not just the justice system as a whole that has to do the heavy lifting. I think it's really a societal change, and everyone has a role to play in that.
The Supreme Court wrapped up its 2-day visit to Yellowknife this week, and later this fall, the Supreme Court will visit the last 2 cities that are part of its tour, which are Sherbrooke, Quebec, and Thunder Bay, Ontario. Bruce de la Cruz, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
Thanks, Bruce. That's all the time we have for your APTN National News for this Thursday. Of course, for more and news anytime, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca. And Creason will be here tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time with your first look at the day's news. I'm Dennis Ward. Marcy Miigwech. Thanks for being with us. Stick around for an encore presentation of Face to Face with our guest, Jessa Skye. Have a great night.